We'll take you now live to camera as well. Peak gas industry body APPEA responding to the government's price cap plans. This is Samantha McCulloch.
Deal between Santos and Brickworks that was struck at rates that were competitive and that both parties were comfortable with. This is how the market is working.
The government has been talking about a strengthened code of conduct for a couple of months. Did you think they were bluffing? I wonder why you're so surprised at what you saw on Friday, given basically talking about going down this route and giving the ADGSM some actual teeth through a code of conduct. Why are you surprised?
Friday's reforms went beyond what most in the industry, most in the community were expecting, because it included not just the temporary or the one-year price cap that could still be extended, but ongoing regulation of gas prices in the code. Now, this started as a voluntary code that was negotiated between gas producers and gas suppliers and the Australian government over almost a 2-year period. It was negotiated in good faith. It provides for transparency around how gas is offered to the market. It provides for a dispute resolution process, but it wasn't given a chance to work. Within 3 weeks of the code of conduct coming into play, the government again was calling for more intervention, and now the mandatory code will be include these regulated price provisions.
Why, given the fact that the vast majority of Australian gas is sold overseas, would a price cap on the local market deter investment? Wouldn't that have a small effect, if any?
Well, what we need to do is be bringing on more supply where it's used in Australia. So when we look at the East Coast market, which is the subject of most of the reform, 80% of gas is produced in Queensland, but the key demand centres are actually in New South Wales and Victoria. And what we're seeing is the supply in those states is either prohibited through moratoriums and bans and delays, or it's declining. So what we need to do is see more investment in those eastern and southern states to meet demand.
Have you spoken with the PM yet, or do you plan to?
We've requested a meeting between APPEA board members and the Prime Minister this week. I think it's important that the Prime Minister meet with the industry to understand the long-term consequences for investment of these reforms.
Is there any indication that that meeting's going to happen? Have you heard anything from the PM's office?
We're liaising with the Prime Minister's office currently.
Can you give me specific examples of investments that might not go ahead because of this?
No, I would have to leave it to my members to make comments on individual projects and the impact of these reforms on individual projects.
Will this new regulation stop the industry selling more of its gas overseas?
Look, the Prime Minister's assured that the long-term LNG contracts would not be interrupted. What would be of a concern here is, among the package announced on Friday night, but also included in the budget, was a quarterly review of the ADGSM, which is the Australian Domestic Gas Security Mechanism. This means that every quarter the government will be looking at whether or not it wants to interrupt those contracts with our major trading partners.
Ben's question a moment ago was about new projects that might not go ahead. You don't want to talk about individual companies, obviously that's for them to discuss. But does APPEA as an organisation have a forecast of how much new gas is meant to be developed over the next 5 or 10 years across the sector, and whether the Friday deal changes that outlook at all?
Look, we've only had this information now for a few days, but what I can say is that analysis we released the week before last by Energy Quest really highlighted the impact of interventions such as price caps on future investment and on the economic viability of projects going forward. And that includes energy storage facilities in Victoria that are key to balancing peak demand during winter periods. It also includes the viability of LNG import terminals. And we know these import terminals are going to play an important role in terms of energy security on the east coast of Australia in the next decade.
We'll leave it there. Samantha McCulloch speaking here. She's wanting a meeting with the main providers and the Prime Minister. Still being pressed on, what projects would not go ahead with this price cap, for example. Says that's up to the individual suppliers to provide them. And worth noting as well, of course, this is the domestic market that's being capped. It's about 5% of the gas, so still a lot of gas that will be exported, whatever happens.